Hey, welcome back to the SNS College Football Podcast. This is the Week 4 preview. As always, we're going to recap Week Three's games, Week Three's bets. We have our Week 3 winners and losers as well, where I'm sure we're going to crush some players, or mostly coaches and programs is what I think we seem to crush the most. And then recap some bets. We got another Conspiracy Corner segment with Dave from Houston. He is on the what do we call the hotline again? I don't remember what.
It's the Path Hotline.
That's right. Yeah, it was your company's. Yeah, as the sponsor. So we got him on the Instapath hotline. We've got Addison on the hotline as well. And once we get through the conspiracy corner, then we will recap, or we'll actually preview Week 4's premier games. We got 3 of them that we're going to look at this week. Michigan at Wisconsin, Auburn at Texas A&M, and then Notre Dame at Georgia. And then we'll talk about our Week 4 bets at the end, which I think we did all right last week. We'll get into that. We had some pretty big winners as far as units. But, Addison, let's start with UNC at Wake. Seemed like Wake really was kind of dominating in that game, and then UNC had a little rally in the fourth. But your thoughts on that game, and did you feel like UNC kind of came back to earth as far as that's kind of the team we think they really are this year?
Well, I didn't see any of this game, but just looking at the
it's a good start for the pod.
the box score and stuff, and just following it, the game cast.
Right.
Wake obviously got off to the fast start. I was also listening to it on the radio. So,
right.
But yeah, Wake got off to a hot start, 21-0 at half. UNC made a very late rally in the fourth quarter. Closed it down to 3. Wake held on for the win, and then they added a field goal for the cover with just over a minute left. So, UNC, yeah, they got outplayed again. It's like 3 for 3 games now. They finally had their first loss. Yeah, it was going to catch up to them eventually.
Yeah.
I still think in the ACC that they'll be competitive, because they have been in every game, and considering the division they're in, and of course this game did not count in the conference standings, so that's good for UNC. So going forward, I think UNC will be all right, but like we said last week, we thought things were going to catch up with them eventually, and this week it kind of did.
Yeah, I think Wake exposed what I thought was going to be the case with UNC. The fact that their front seven is going to struggle against strong ground games all year. I think you're going to see that come to fruition this week against a pretty frisky Appalachian State team that's off a bye. That's a little teaser for a possible bet later in the segment. But UNC's got Clemson coming into their place the week after. So they've got an interesting couple game stretch here, but I felt like Wake impressed me with when we previewed it. We talked about the athletes that were around Jamie Newman, and I didn't think he played particularly great, but they definitely did pretty much what they wanted on the ground. I thought Sam Howell, and Dave, I'm going to go to you with this because I think you and I have talked about him a few times, kind of off air, but I feel like he's had some slow starts in some of these games, and I didn't like his body language in the game. Like I felt like they talked about this a little bit on the telecast. Like he just he seemed kind of down on himself, and they brought in the backup for a few series. But he's obviously flashed great potential. But how did you feel about him in this game and UNC moving forward?
So I felt like he played like a freshman. Definitely with the body language, but also with the feet in the pocket. I just saw him backing up quite a bit, especially in the first half with some of those throws. And then, as you may expect from a freshman with a lot of talent, it got better throughout the game, and he made some plays toward the end of the game. I think that with UNC going forward, they're too much of a volatile team for me. They play inconsistent defense, and Sam Howell's just going to have ups and downs as a freshman. So I don't see UNC as a significant contender in the ACC going forward. I do think Wake will be one of the more competitive teams. I think that's really the highest praise that you can give like a second-tier team in the ACC right now. But I think Wake will be more competitive. I thought their defensive line, their tackling was really good. And Jamie Newman, not the greatest game for him, but he made some plays and was just like very, very poised throughout the game. So I like seeing that from Wake.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Wake because it seems like they can create some havoc on that D line, and they've got some playmakers on offense. I was looking at their schedule, and I don't think it's too ridiculous for them to win maybe 9 games, like maybe even 10 in that conference. They've got Elon this week, which should be a win, and then they're at BC. Bye week, interesting little 2-game stretch where they got Louisville and Florida State at home, then another bye week, and then they get NC State at home. They're at Virginia Tech, at Clemson, which will be a loss, but then they're Duke and at Syracuse. And I mean, I think every one of those is a winnable game, but at Clemson, I mean, right? Like I think they can beat Louisville and Florida State.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because their defense surprised me at how decent they were.
Yeah, no, I was pleasantly surprised with their defensive line. I thought that was going to be the weakest part of their team this year, but they've been creating a lot of negative plays, so it's interesting. Addison, any final thoughts before we move on to the next game?
No, I don't have any additional thoughts on that one.
Okay, so we'll move on to the battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy, Iowa at Iowa State. Iowa ended up pulling this out 18-17, and guys, I'll start with you, Dave, this time. When I went through the game, I didn't get to see too much of this game, but Iowa State, 7.1 yards per play, Iowa 3.9. I think it seemed to me like turnovers seemed to be a critical part of this game, but your thoughts on the game? Do you feel like Iowa State was the better team, or am I a little bit? Go ahead.
Well, you realize it was hard to watch just because of multiple long delays.
Yeah.
So I started watching a game and then it got delayed, and then came back and watched it a little bit and then went off to do something else. And by the time I got back from doing something else, it was like basically at the same point in the game. So that made it difficult to watch it. It made the game very weird. But I thought that Iowa State looked like the better team. They had more explosive plays, and Iowa just did weird Iowa things to stay in the game, create some turnovers, and I guess get a field goal or get a touchdown late. To win the game.
Yeah, Addison, what were your thoughts on the game, and do you think do you still feel as confident in Iowa State as you did before the game, or how do you feel about Iowa moving forward as well?
Well, they just found a way to win an ugly game, rivalry game on the road. So yeah, Iowa, kind of got outplayed, but they stayed in it and then made some plays at the end to pull it out. So I'll give them some credit there. They're still struggling to run the ball though, Iowa. So that's a concern. They're only able to put up 112 yards on the ground, but one of the huge keys in this game for Iowa winning was just holding the ball. They had 35 minutes of possession, and total plays in the game was 81 to 59 in favor of Iowa. So, they basically just kind of ball controlled a lot. They won the turnover battle. It's things like that were reasons that they were able to pull out this ugly win. Iowa State had some chances at the end. They were driving for a late field goal. They were right on the edge of field goal range. They tried to zone read. Brock Purdy tripped in the backfield and just lost like 5 yards. So then they ended up having to go for it on 4th down and didn't get it. And then they held Iowa to a punt on that drive, but when they were getting the ball back on the return, one of the blockers for Iowa State ran into the Iowa State return man and So it was a fumble, and Iowa recovered it, and then that was game over. Both these teams going forward, I don't know, just the way the Big Ten West has looked, I think Iowa's still in decent shape in that division. Nebraska doesn't look as good. Purdue doesn't look as good. Northwestern doesn't. So I think it's a division's kind of a two-team race, it seems like to me. Right now, and Iowa does have to go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's looked like clearly the best team in that division so far.
You're discounting Tolman and I's Gophers there.
Yeah,
we haven't seen much from them though.
No, I agree.
They just keep winning close games against like not great teams, but
yeah, they're not very good.
Yeah. And Iowa State, I think that for them, the Big 12 looks a little more competitive than I originally thought it was going to be. Oklahoma State, Baylor, some of those teams like Kansas State, even they're definitely better than I was expecting going into the year. So I still think Iowa State's a solid team. So they'll be fine going forward.
Yeah.
I thought that. To begin the season, Iowa was like the third or fourth best team in the Big 12, and that's what they've looked like to me.
Okay. Yeah, obviously it was ugly game. I don't have a whole lot else to add. I think I am impressed with Iowa State's line play and their defense overall. I think that's going to help them in a conference that doesn't really excel in those aspects of the game. So I still am pretty high on Iowa State. Iowa, I think you put it pretty perfectly, Addison. I don't really love that Iowa is not able to control the line of scrimmage offensively as far as running the ball and setting up their passing game for success. But like you said, in the West, it's I think still obviously it's very early in the season and they are still going to be a contender. So both those teams still have everything that they, I think, are trying to play for in front of them. But we'll move on to our Week 3 winners and losers. So Dave, I'll start with you. If you want to give some winners, and then I'll go. And Addison, I don't know if you have winners this week. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But I know that you'll definitely have losers. So, but Dave, I'll start with you, man. Your winners.
So my winners of the week are the state of football and Kansas. Kansas, big Friday night victory of plus multiple touchdowns against Boston College and absolutely dominated them offensively, racked up almost 800 total yards. And it was the first time they had beat out-of-conference Power 5 opponent in like 48 games or something like that. So that was pretty significant. And then Kansas State, with what they're doing this year, they won a tough road game in Starkville against Mississippi State. And I call their coaching staff winners. They're a pretty solid coaching staff. They came from North Dakota State, 4 out of the last 5 FCS championships. So solid coaching continuing at Kansas State.
Yeah, I actually kind of boring. I have some of the same winners. I got Les Miles in Kansas. I was going to say Chris Klieman at Kansas State. I want to add a couple players as well. I thought Dylan Gabriel at UCF. I know Stanford was torched by USC through the year the week before that. So maybe it wasn't as much of a surprise, but Gabriel is a true freshman. It looks like he has a lock on that job over Mack and Wimbush, who both were thought to be the guys that were possibly going to be the quarterback for that team moving forward. But he's shown a lot of explosiveness as far as being able to push the ball down the field, and he's again making UCF look like a pretty dangerous team. I also want to give a homer shout out to J.K. Dobbins. He bowled over some guys in Bloomington this weekend. He had a big game. I think he had 175 yards in the first half, and then they pretty much pulled him after a few more carries in the second half. But he had a big game. I'm starting to hear some Heisman rumblings for him. I don't know if that's going to come to fruition, but yeah. So definitely Kansas football and those other guys. But
holy shit!
What's
up?
up?
Odell Beckham catch?
I did not. I have the game on, but I think it's on delay for me. Yeah, Browns and Jets right now.
Just one-handed it.
Yeah, that's what he tends to do. So I guess I'll see it in a sec here. But yeah, Addison, any winners while I wait for this play to happen?
Um, well, a funny thing about you said, J.K. Dobbins. Early on in that game, the announcers were talking, and they said the Indiana coaches thought that they were going to be able to stop our power running game, which is hilarious.
That's funny.
We went for 314 yards.
Yeah, that's funny.
So that ended up looking really stupid on their part. I also have a homer winner this week. I'm going with the Ohio State defense. So far this season, we've held in 3 games every opponent under 300 yards. We only did that 3 times all of last year. So even though it's early and these aren't the best teams, really, we can already say the OSU defense looks far better than it was last year. I mean, it didn't take long for us to realize last year that there were a lot of flaws in the defense. I mean, game 1 we were struggling with Oregon State defensively, so we were concerned pretty early there. But so far this year, they've been lights out, and that can really take Ohio State to the next level if they keep playing that way. I think that's all I got for winners. So, all right, losers.
Yeah, go for it.
Definitely going Maryland. All the hype, and then go and come back down to earth against Temple. Got exposed a little bit. Got outplayed in the process too. Not a good game for Maryland. And the biggest loser easily is Michigan State offense, I'd say. They just look the exact same as they did last year, which is to say pretty fucking terrible. This offense, it's so archaic and so predictable, and they're just showing that you can have an amazing defense, but you have to try on offense a little bit. And the fact that in the offseason, D'Antonio made no changes to that staff other than just shuffling guys, that's not gonna cut it. They needed to do something, and they chose to do nothing. And now this is where they are. They're wasting an elite defense. It's definitely one of the best defenses in the country. Hold the other team to 10 points and you lose the game. There's no way they should be. Arizona State had 216 yards of offense. There's no way you should lose a game, doing that defensively. But their offense is just so shitty that they find ways to lose these type of games still.
Yeah, D'Antonio is definitely one of my losers. Arizona State ranks they're in the triple digits in every offensive line metric. And I, like you said, Addison, I don't know how Michigan State lost that game. And I do know, but you know what I mean. I don't know how you can be that bad offensively when, they've got some guys on the offense that flash that makes me think they should be able to at least be not absolutely dreadful, but the coaching is not putting them in a position to win, in my opinion. I think that I'm putting it on D'Antonio. He gets a lot of respect from the coaching community and the national media, but he, like you said, he is wasting an elite defense. And it's their offense. It's going to cost them. They're not going to be able to compete with teams like Ohio State in the East if their offense is going to play like that. My other losers. Willie Taggart, you are 3 for 3 this year. You might become a permanent fixture. Florida State, once again, up 14-10 at halftime, up 17-10 after the third quarter, and they end up giving up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Florida State, second half, you just take their opponent, and they're going to cover for you second half. Willie Taggart and his staff continuing to get outcoached every single game, second half. Florida State, they should be a little bit better than what they are. They've got too many athletes on that roster, in my opinion, to be as bad as what their record is right now, which is just 1-2. But I think this team is not really a whole lot better than what they were last year. They're slightly better, if at best. But Willie Taggart's going to be on this list for a while. He needs to prove it to me till I take him off. Last guy, last but not least, Pat Narduzzi is 100% the biggest loser for me this week. I think at one point Pitt was down 7 points with like 6 minutes left or something like that. I'm not sure if I'm getting that right, but he decided to kick a field goal, I think from the 1 yard line. And like his justification was he still needed 2 scores to win or something like that. So I don't know. He's just a horrendous head coach. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that is an awful decision. Yeah, that is inexcusable.
Yeah. I just there's no words that can describe how bad of a coach I think he is. So he might be on the
touchdown. You need a touchdown.
Yeah.
And you're on the 1 yard line. Like,
yeah.
How do you not go for it there? You might not even get the ball back that late in the game.
Yeah, he's I think he plays not to lose a lot, and that's gonna get his ass canned. So, Tolman, some losers for you.
Some that we haven't talked about yet. How about the general competitiveness of the ACC? Boston College got destroyed by Kansas. Virginia Tech in a pretty close game against FCS Furman. Georgia Tech lost to the Citadel. NC State lost to West Virginia. And
they had a bad weekend.
And when two ACC teams played each other, Florida State's coaching melted down once again, and they blew a lead. And Syracuse got destroyed by Clemson. So I think it's really Clemson and everybody else.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's bad in that conference. I know there's definitely some respected people that they have the Mountain West power rated higher than the ACC right now. So that's pretty pathetic. But yeah, any other losers for you?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Hey Nick, something funny about the Willie Taggart situation.
Yeah.
So I guess his buyout is $17 million.
That's a lot.
Yeah. There's some 4-year-old kid is a Florida State fan who has a lemonade stand. He's trying to raise money to buy out Willie Taggart's contract.
I hope he gets there for his sake.
Yeah.
Will, I said it, I think, within our thread that Willie, he needs to give money back. Coaches like him and like Narduzzi, I think if they make boneheaded decisions like they do and consistently get outcoached, they should be forced to give money back. That's just my opinion. But yeah, we'll move on to our week 3 bets now. So we'll quickly go through. We'll each give like how we do it on the pod is we give like a bet that worked out very well, or maybe a bet that was horrible. Maybe a couple of them if we have some that are worth mentioning. But we'll start with Corey. He had NC State -7 at West Virginia. West Virginia ended up beating their asses, so that didn't work out. But he did have Temple +7.5 versus Maryland, which I know a few of us had Maryland in that game. And Temple ended up winning that game outright, so good call by him. He felt like that line was stinky, and he went in the right direction. The rest of us took the bait. Steele decided to spray the board with 23 bets last weekend, and I think he had Arizona State +15. They obviously won on the field at Michigan State. We covered that. A bad bet for him, I would say, Indiana +17.5. They got stomped by Ohio State, so that did not end up working out. Addison, go ahead and recap a couple of your bets there.
Okay, well, I was 3-1, so
winner.
The one loss, that'll be my worst bet. That was Maryland -6.5. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that one already.
Yeah.
That was a stinky line. I thought it was going to go up higher. At first, it started to go up and then came back down.
Yeah.
That's when we started to get nervous.
Yeah, for sure.
Then it's funny how often those types of games end up going, the way the pros seem to be telling you to go. So, yeah, that was the bad bet. Best bet, I would say the Iowa State under 44.5. 7-3 at the half. At that point, I was like, okay, we're in good shape here. Wasn't really ever a threat to go over, I didn't think. I expected a very defensive game, and that's what we got. So, well, a funny story about my Kentucky bet, 8.5. That covered by half a point late in the game. Kentucky, I think they missed a field goal late, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, they missed a field goal, and then they gave up a 75-yard touchdown to Florida right after that. I was drunk Saturday night, and I thought that had made me lose the bet, so I was all pissed off, and then Coleman was like, wait, you won.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't do math right now.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I had Air Force best bet paid off for the 4th straight week, so that's good. They ended up winning on the field at Colorado. The game ended up going to overtime, which was really frustrating because it never should have got there. Also got an early line in Oklahoma. They blasted UCLA, so those worked out. I just had the one loss in Maryland also. We've covered that. So, Dave, if you want to give a couple of years, and then we'll move on to I'll let you transition into Conspiracy Corner.
Sure. So probably my best bet was I got TCU at a very early line, plus 3.5 against Purdue. They beat Purdue pretty handily, and looked surprisingly good doing it. My worst bet, and these are bets that I need to stop making, are I had Southern Miss in Troy under 51.5, and just living down here as long as I have, I feel like I know these lower tier teams from the South. And I always, Troy, fantastic defense. Southern Miss I thought had a better defense this year, but that ended up scoring almost 100 points combined. It didn't work out for me.
Yeah, I had a lean of Southern Miss plus 39 against Bama, and then I was reviewing that game and Southern Miss's defense overall, and that scares the shit out of me. So that's not going to be a bet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so why don't you go ahead and we'll transition into Conspiracy Corner. So what do you have for us this week?
All right, so this is a conspiracy that I totally made up based on a current hot topic in the collegiate athletic world. So a bill was passed through the legislative branch in California this week that will allow players to get paid. Players will be able to profit from their name and from their likeness. And this is the first type of piece of legislature that's ever made it through to give players to be able to benefit from their talents. So now the bill hasn't fully passed; it still can be vetoed by the governor. But the NCAA came down and they said that if this bill passes, then we are going to disallow the 48 schools that belong to the NCAA from the NCAA. So that means no more Pac-12, no more, a lot of prominent schools that come out of California. So is this bill going to pass? We don't know. Is the NCAA's threat going to work out? We don't know, but wouldn't it be fun if California actually wanted this because they believe that the NCAA is a bullshit organization, and this is a way for them to secede from the NCAA and get better players, bring West Coast football relevant again, and allow their players to have some benefits like smoke legal weed and benefit from their likeness.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that we've had this conversation for a while. I know Addison and I have, we've had this conversation for sure for years that we think the NCAA is a very corrupt and poorly run organization. And by poorly, I mean just absolute hot garbage dog shit. It's funny when they talked about, things being unconstitutional when I think they would just be doing unconstitutional things themselves. But I mean, it's not unreasonable to think, like you said, Dave, that these schools in this state are like, you know what, this is possibly one of the darkest times in the history of athletics on the West Coast. These kids want to get paid. It's obviously a lot more liberal along the coast there, and I think that like I said, it's not unreasonable that they might be pulling this just to be like, you know what, F everybody else, we're gonna do our own thing. This is how we're gonna have our edge as far as recruiting, bringing kids to the West Coast. So I mean, I'm open minded to anything like that. Addison, your thoughts on that?
You can make Bill Walton the commissioner of
yeah.
the newly formed Pac-12 the California League. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they could do like a round robin or something. The California schools like USC, Stanford, Cal. They can all just play each other twice or something. Do a home and away.
Mix in some UC Irvine and UC San Diego.
Throwing some like Fresno State, those type of schools, make that your conference. I've got some questions about this. Like, so they're saying they're making it legal, but that already is technically legal to make money, just not under NCAA rules.
Right.
So I actually don't really understand what the bill is doing, but I hate the NCAA though. It's obviously like a cartel that they're just. And the schools are all part of it too, because the schools don't. They're making a shitload of money off of these players. Like the amount of, the value to these athletic programs. Like you can't even measure it. It's so high. Not just the actual dollars they're bringing in, but just the notoriety, that the schools get from being on TV and all that stuff. It's just an incredible amount of value there. It's the setup of the NCAA. It's great for the people that run the NCAA. It's great for the people that run the schools, but obviously it sucks ass for all the players. So they're trying to keep it that way, and it would be good if the NCAA didn't exist anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think moving forward, it's just these the NCAA is making so much money and the schools are making so much money off these kids that there's just going to be more and more of a push for them to get paid for at least their likeness. I know there's obviously an argument for them just getting paid outright, and then you have the people on the other side of the fence that argue that they're getting free education, but. California, it's not surprising they're the ones that are kind of taking the first steps as far as something a little bit more drastic, I guess, if you want to go there. So,
it's like, how stupid is it that, I don't think the schools should be paying the players, but why can't boosters give them money? Why can't they get free meals and stuff like that if people want to give it to them?
I think I don't know. I think it always comes down to that bottom line, and if the NCAA feels like they're going to lose out on something, then they're going to obviously try to prevent it from happening, I guess. But it seems silly to me that a kid can't make money off of 30,000 people wearing his jersey number. I think it's kind of ridiculous. So, Dave, anything else to wrap that up, or do we want to get into our Week 4 preview?
No, that was great. Let's talk about Week 4.
Nice. All right. So first game we're going to cover is Michigan at Wisconsin. I think a pretty damn interesting game, to be quite frank, for me personally. I think Michigan hasn't really looked too great the first 2 weeks of the year. Both teams are coming off a bye coming into this game. Wisconsin, on the other hand, has looked pretty fantastic, even though they've played two atrocious programs in South Florida and Central Michigan. But I think the line right now is somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think Wisconsin is -3.5 right now. Opened 3, I believe, and that line actually moved about 8 points within 1 week. So a lot of movement here. I think the market is realizing that they might have overvalued Michigan by quite a bit to begin the year. Maybe undervalued Wisconsin a little bit. It could be a combination of those things. Addison, I'll start with you. What are you looking for in this game from both teams? Where do you think there maybe is an edge for one team over another? Maybe both teams have an edge over the other one in some aspect. And what do you think the outcome's going to be? And obviously, I guess your lean or a bet if you had one.
Well, it will be interesting to see these two teams, finally playing good competition. Although Michigan, against lower competition hasn't looked too great, but Wisconsin has, and they have yet to give up a point on the year. Now they've played some pretty garbage teams, so we don't know what to make of that yet. Both teams are off a bye. So is there an edge? Obviously, there's not really an edge there for either team, but I think Michigan's pretty happy to have a bye, or was pretty happy to have a bye at this point, just because the offense isn't really clicking. Their supposed new look offense, and they haven't. They've kind of struggled to run the ball, or at least against Army. They really.
Alert! They can't run the ball. Like, what was that beeping?
Yeah, I was setting the oven.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Addison.
We have a new soundboard on the pod.
Yeah, apparently
I started operating without telling you guys.
Yeah. As soon as Addison mentioned, Michigan still cannot run the ball, that alert is going off. So, continue though, Addison.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin has been lights out on D. Michigan struggled to run the ball. Definitely give the edge to Wisconsin there. Also at Camp Randall. Interesting thing though, this is an 11 a.m. start in Wisconsin. So just early on, at least, take away a little of that big crowd edge that Wisconsin usually has. In those early kickoffs, the students usually aren't even in the stands till like the second quarter. So it'd be interesting to see if that affects like the atmosphere at all for this game.
Yeah, I guess my main questions are: is Michigan's O-line going to struggle again this week? Wisconsin's D-line front seven have been pretty dominant to begin the year, but like we said, they have played South Florida and Central Michigan, so it's kind of hard to read into that. The one thing I will give Wisconsin credit for is, like you alluded to, Addison, they've played two terrible teams, but they haven't played down to their competition. They've even exceeded expectations against those teams. And Michigan, you can't say the same for them. They didn't look too sharp against Middle Tennessee. They looked not only bad against Army, but really Army, I think, should have won that football game. And that's not me being an OSU fan. I think that a lot of people would agree with that. I'm a little curious about the quarterbacks in this game. I'm curious to see if Jack Cohen's going to be able to complete passes consistently down the field against Don Brown's defense. And I'm curious to see if Shea Patterson can find some consistency, because I think he missed a lot of passes against Army that could have helped them clinch that game a little earlier opposed to in overtime. And he didn't look too good in overtime either. But Addison, did you have, before I hand it over to Dave, did you have a lean against like the number, or who do you think is going to win the football game straight up?
It's tough. I predicted that the line would come out at Wisconsin -3. So
yeah.
Right where I thought it would be. I don't know. I'm gonna go Wisconsin. It's close though.
Yeah. It is.
Because I don't like how Michigan looks right now.
Yeah, I think I would lean Wisconsin as well. I just think that their front seven is going to give Michigan's line some problems again. I think Wisconsin might be a little better than what I thought entering the year, but we'll see. This is going to be a very telling game, obviously. Dave, your thoughts on the game, and same thing I asked Addison. What are you looking for in this game? Who do you think actually wins it? If you have an actual bet, yeah.
I took Wisconsin as the line was fluctuating at -2.5. So I do think Wisconsin will win the game and cover. I did see an edge between the two teams. I think that Michigan is going to turn the ball over, and somehow I think I have a little bit of trust that Jack Cohn can avoid turnovers. And then if you got Michigan turn the ball over, I'm pretty confident that Wisconsin's going to be able to control the game and dominate time of possession. So Michigan turnovers, Wisconsin control the ball. That's why I give Wisconsin the edge and place the bet.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, I think Addison and I pretty much agree with your bet and what you're saying. I do think it's close. I think I actually think I saw that Steele booked Michigan plus 3.5. So yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of eyes on this game. Not only regionally, but I think nationally, people are curious about Michigan and Wisconsin. Let's move on to the second game we're going to preview. It's going to be Auburn at Texas A&M. I believe, Tolman, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a 3:30 kickoff. Is that right, or 4 o'clock?
Yeah, it's the CBS.
CBS 3:30? Okay.
Best SEC game at 3:30.
Okay.
3:30 in the Central Time.
All right, so yeah, this is, I think, a pretty interesting game. Obviously, two teams that I think we felt like coming into the year were possibly could be like surprise SEC West contenders. Bama and LSU obviously looked like the cream of the crop. But Dave, I'll go to you first, being kind of down in, well, I guess you were kind of in SEC territory before, but not so much now. But A&M is, I guess, still Texas. So yeah.
I'm right in between, man. I'm like,
it's perfect.
Hour and a half away from College Station.
Yeah, it's perfect. So your thoughts on this game? It's kind of the same questions. Do you see an edge anywhere with one of these teams? Who do you think is going to win it outright?
I don't see an edge between these two teams. I think that is going to be a very, very close game. I think that Texas A&M is going to try to control the ball, and Auburn needs to avoid making mistakes, and Bo Nix getting frustrated in a very, very cool and hostile environment in Texas A&M. So I like this game to be low scoring. I did book the under at 49.5, and I think it could come down to a late field goal and maybe answer the question: is the Bo Nix legend growing? This is an opportunity for him to start writing that book.
Yeah, I got some thoughts written down. I'm wondering about him in his first big road test. That game against Oregon was a neutral site game, and obviously when we previewed that, or when we recapped that week, we talked about him maybe not having, the best statistical game, but he looked like he could become a star. Like he made some big plays and big moments at the end of that game. But it's interesting because A&M, I think we can use the Clemson game as a little bit of a barometer. Like, they struggled a little bit with Clemson's D-line. Is that going to be the same against an elite Auburn defensive line? Auburn, as good as their D-line has been, they haven't been getting to the quarterback that much, but they are generally winning the battle in the line of scrimmage. The Auburn O-line, though, is struggling again quite a bit from what I've seen, and what when I've gone through some of the metrics. I'm a little concerned that A&M is going to bring some pressure on Nix in a hostile environment. I agree with you, T. I really do not have a lean in this game. If you're forcing me for entertainment purposes for the pod, I think I'm going to go with A&M. Just home environment, veteran quarterback. I think I like Jimbo a little bit more than Gus. I'm going to go with them. I think it's -4 right now. I'll say they cover, but I have no bet on this. I'm not confident in that at all. I wouldn't be shocked if Auburn won this game.
If I had to lean on the spread, I would lean Auburn just because I think it's going to be that close of a game. I think it could be like a 1 or 2 point game, but I'm not going to bet the spread because of volatility with Bo Nix. Like, things could go bad for him, and wouldn't be good for Auburn.
Yeah, makes sense. Addison, your thoughts on this game? Same questions, obviously, as before.
Well, the line, if I took it, I would take A&M.
Okay.
Just my thoughts are freshman quarterback, first big road test, and it's a hostile environment.
Okay. Pretty
much my reasoning there.
Okay. Yeah, obviously we think that's going to be an interesting game. It'll be close. We'll see if Bo Nix, like like Dave said, if the legend continues to grow, or maybe if A&M gets a signature win on the year and that young team starts to build some confidence moving forward in that rugged division. So let's move on to the third and final game that we're going to preview. It's going to be Notre Dame at Georgia. This is a 7:30 kickoff, I believe, on CBS. Kind of interesting. We've talked about these two teams quite a bit this year as far as kind of like off the air. Obviously, Steele is a Notre Dame fan, and I think we all feel pretty strongly about Georgia and their chances to possibly make the playoff again this year. Addison, I'll start with you this time. Your same questions. Your thoughts on this game? Is there an edge, like a big edge for one of these teams somewhere? And your lean against the number, which right now currently it kind of depends on the book. I think we can call it 14 right now. But your lean, I guess, at 14, and who do you think wins this game?
Yeah, I'm looking at Bovada right now, and it's at 14, so
Okay.
we'll go with that.
Sure.
But anyway, one of the big matchups in this game that we've been talking about a lot last few weeks are Georgia's running game versus Notre Dame's D line. So in their front seven. So week one, and it was just week one, so I'm not going to try and make too much of it. But Louisville did have a decent amount of success on the ground in that game. I think they ended up with like 230 something yards rushing. Georgia's been rushing for 8.8 yards per carry this year, so that's second
Is that
best
good?
in the country. Second best in the country, only behind Oklahoma. And they've got a stable of backs, led by DeAndre Swift. They've got a bunch of guys who can run the ball. It's been pretty impressive. Again, here we are with two teams that haven't really played anyone great yet, so we're going to find out a lot more about them. Another reason I'm looking forward to this game. But yeah, that is the big matchup. So that'll be interesting to see. So Notre Dame, they rank like 104th in yards per carry allowed defensively. Small sample size, so I don't want to make too much of that, but obviously, if you want to stop Georgia, you're going to have to stop that rushing attack.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame's insiders, I think leading up to this year, they felt like that their strength on defense, and Steele covered this really well in our ACC and Notre Dame preview pod, if you guys want to go back and check that out. Actually, you probably don't need to. That pod sucked because the ACC is terrible. But if you do want to know a little bit about Notre Dame, Steele is a fan. He covers them extensively. And he did a good job of talking about that their strength was going to be at D-end. It was going to be at corner. But their possible weaknesses and their lack of experience this year was going to be at both defensive tackle spots and then at middle linebacker. And you kind of saw that come to fruition against Louisville. And like Addison said, it's a small sample size. But I'm seriously concerned for Notre Dame in this game as far as very, very hostile environment. If you get down very early, you're not able to stop the run. That's obviously a big issue. I do think Georgia's going to gash them pretty good. I am actually really curious about the other side of the ball. If you want to keep Georgia from ball controlling themselves and just mauling you when you're on defense, then I think Notre Dame needs to stay ahead of the chains and move the chains against Georgia when they're on offense. So I talked to Steele a little bit about this off the air. I think Notre Dame, if I'm coaching them, I would like to see them pass it actually quite a bit on first down, try to open it up a little, because I think Georgia, Kirby Smart all offseason was talking about just creating more havoc, bringing more pressure overall. And Ian Book seems like a pretty cerebral dude. Like, I think he does pretty well facing pressure, but when they played a very fast and a very, what would you call it, like a program that creates a lot of havoc in Clemson last year, they struggled mightily. And I think Georgia might try to mirror that. So I think Notre Dame needs to pass it a little bit on first down, get the backs involved in the passing game. But I'm, like you said, Addison, I'm curious about two teams that, it's early in the year. We haven't seen a ton yet. But if Notre Dame wants to win this game, they're going to have to stop the run. Like, they're not going to stop it, but they need to at least make it to where, it's not just so easy for Georgia, I think. But we'll get into the bets later, but I feel confident enough that I did in fact bet Georgia minus 13. I do think they're going to cover this game by a couple of touchdowns at least. So, Dave, I'll go to you. Same questions as before. Your thoughts on this game?
Well, I think even if Notre Dame can stop Georgia's run game, you've got to get some big plays from Ian Book to stay in the game, and I don't see that happening. So I did bet Georgia. I got them at minus 12. I like them to win by 17.
Okay, yeah. It's gonna be if Notre Dame were to win this game, that's gonna throw a big time wrench into the playoff conversation. No, Addison, I think I saw you talking about that a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be like last year where Notre Dame might be stealing a spot from one of the Power 5 conferences if they can pull off the upset here, because I think people this year assumed they were going to lose at Ann Arbor, and not that they still couldn't, but Michigan obviously so far has not looked the part of a team that should be definitely favored over a team like Notre Dame. So a couple of the other teams in Notre Dame's schedule haven't looked quite as good either. Like Stanford definitely is not as good as we thought they would be. So I don't know. It'd be interesting, but I really feel pretty confident.
Do you think that if Notre Dame goes undefeated again, and there are multiple undefeated teams for that fourth spot, do you think they'll get the kind of purgatory from college football playoff just based on their performance last year?
I mean, that's a good question. I think last year's not supposed to do with anything, but because it's pretty subjective, I think it's still in a lot of the committee's minds. So I think that's possible.
I feel like that's been a factor in what's happened to Ohio State. Granted, they weren't always the most deserving, but I feel like that's been in the discussion with Ohio State since that Clemson blowout.
Yeah, I mean I think it's certainly possible. Addison, do you agree with that at all, or do you think there's something there to that?
I think Notre Dame will get, if they can win this game, they'll get a lot of credit. They'll get a huge boost for beating Georgia. I think if they beat Georgia, then they have kind of a mulligan going forward after that.
Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah, I feel confident. I think T and I feel confident that's not going to happen. But
it would obviously put a huge dent in the SEC getting multiple teams discussion. So
for sure, yeah, for sure. Okay, so yeah, we feel, to kind of recap it. It seems like this pod and group overall feel that Wisconsin is going to pull out a home victory over Michigan. We seem to be pretty split on A&M and Auburn. That's going to be an interesting game to watch. Notre Dame and Georgia, seems like we are favoring Georgia. Addison, do you have a lean at 14 one way or the other?
I don't feel too strongly about it.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I think Georgia's going to win.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Comfortable win, I'd say. Maybe not a blowout, but, a couple touchdowns.
Okay, sure.
So basically right at the line.
All right, so we will move on to the last segment of the pod. It's going to be our week 4 bets and or our leans. I'll start with a couple for the other guys. Corey seems to feel very strongly about the Colorado-Arizona State under at 51.5. Arizona State, their offensive line and offense overall is atrocious. Colorado, they've got a playmaking quarterback and receiver, but they've actually struggled until late in games to get things going offensively. So that could be a pretty solid bet. He seems to also I'll give one more, I guess. He's got Washington -5 at BYU. I haven't dug too much into that game, but he seems to feel pretty confident in that. Steele has, looks like he likes BC to rebound off of that blowout versus Kansas. They are playing at Rutgers. They're -7. And then he has the over in Tulane, Houston, which we're going to get into that game in a few minutes here with Dave and I. But he sees some points being scored in that game. Addison, I'll let you go with your bets now and your reasons for why.
Okay. Well, just pulling up the doc here. Some of these I've already not gotten great numbers, which is very annoying.
Good start. Yeah.
Because I have Northwestern +7. They host Michigan State right now, and now that's up to 8.5. But the way Michigan State plays offense, we've already talked about it so much now. I would never want to lay a touchdown with them, like, to anyone, really, it seems like, especially not the Big Ten on the road.
Yeah.
So, and that game is going to be really ugly, too. I haven't booked the under yet, but I was probably going to do that, too. 38.5 is what I saw.
That's so low.
It's so low, and I still just, like, I wouldn't, like, I said earlier, I don't see either of these teams getting to 20 points.
Yeah.
So I think you can't set this line low enough.
Yeah, 17 to 10, 16 to 10, that feels right. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, 17-10, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the way Michigan State's been playing offense and what we saw from Northwestern to start the year, that should be a very low-scoring game, you would think. We've also got Texas -7. That's down to it was 6.5 to start, then went up to 7, and then went down to 5. So
you know why that is? The SP Plus full rankings got posted on ESPN, and like Oklahoma State was ranked, I think, 10 to 15 spots higher, and really, yeah.
So. All right, well, the thing is, I don't think Oklahoma State's defense is really good. I do think they will get their points, but they won't keep up with Texas. Texas is just a more well-rounded team, in my opinion. I get Kentucky 7.5 again. Going with the Blue Cats, second week in a row. It feels weird. But that number is actually off the board right now. I think they're waiting on, like, news about Tommy Stevens or something. So
interesting, yeah.
We'll see what that ends up being and how that injury situation goes. Colorado +7.5 at Arizona State. So even though Arizona State got the win against Michigan State, I have not been impressed by them this year. They're now ranked. I think they're pretty overrated. I don't think they're 3-0, but they haven't been impressive in any of their games really. Nick, you talked about that a little bit already.
Yeah.
So I'm just selling Arizona State right now. Not good offensively. I think their quarterback has got a lot of potential, but like as a whole, the offense obviously hasn't been very good this year. And then I had UCLA. Nick, you'll probably laugh at that one because not a big fan of DTR, but they are getting 18 points. Actually, that's up to 19 now. So it's been going up and down a little bit. They're at Washington State. Washington State, not a convincing win over Houston, I would say. I don't know how much you saw that game, Tolman.
Yeah, I mean, they look by far the better team, but they kind of just got backdoored on a garbage time touchdown. So, but they didn't look. They didn't jump off the page, but they didn't look bad either.
Yeah. So UCLA last year, they were obviously terrible out of conference, and they got into Pac-12 play, and they looked better. So I'm hoping that they can get things righted a little bit. Like at this point, I don't think UCLA is obviously going to be a good team at all, but just be a little more competitive in Pac-12 play. I don't know if Chip's got, some edges or anything coaching-wise against some of these Pac-12 teams that he was able to do better in conference play last year, so we'll see.
Yeah, so have you ever heard of Austin Burton, Addison?
No, who is that?
That is UCLA's backup quarterback, and his stats last year are did not play. Those are better stats than what DTR has, in my opinion. So I would think for you that if Chip could get that kid maybe some playing time and see if he's any good, go ahead and put him in. No, I mean, I actually don't dislike that bet like you might think I would. I do despise DTR. I think he is terrible. He could definitely cost you your cover. But they definitely were a lot better last year in conference. Like I noticed that looking at them because they just fascinate me. Like it fascinates me how bad that Chip has things going right now. The only thing that would concern me a little, this sometimes gets overplayed, this narrative of like looking ahead, but Washington State is at Utah next week, I believe. So like maybe there's something to that, and you get a little bit with UCLA there, but yeah, that could be pretty interesting. So I'll give a couple of mine real quick. I have a few more bets than I had last week already, but um, and Dave, I'll let you talk about this one a little bit as well. I do have Tulane -2.5 is my best bet for the week versus Houston. That line, I believe, is out to 5 or 5.5 in some books now. It's on Thursday night, so it's going to be a very short week of prep for Houston, who just came off of having to play Mike Leach, playing like 5 wide sets, a much different type of scheme where now they are going on the road short week and playing Willie Fritz's triple option. I love Willie Fritz. It's triple option from the shotgun. It's a completely different dynamic. Houston is 121st in the country in rushing yards per play allowed this year so far. Small sample, but you can see that Houston is not really any different than what they were last year against the run. Like they were a little better having Ed Oliver, but when he wasn't in, you could see how bad they were. And Tulane's actually been pretty decent defensively or this year so far. I actually think Tulane has a chance to win this game by double digits. Actually, I really like them in this matchup, but I'll give, I guess, one other one or two more. I'll give another spread and then a total. I like Appalachian State at UNC quite a bit this week. App State is off a bye week. UNC has Clemson coming into town the next week after this. UNC has been, we alluded to this a little bit before, they have been really poor against the run this year, and App State is very strong on the ground. So I like App State to keep that game close and possibly even win that on the field. Addison, you also mentioned this with Texas, Oklahoma State. I booked that over at 71. I think that's really low for this game. I think Texas is going to be able to do what they want offensively, and I think that Sanders for Oklahoma State and the weapons he has on the outside, I think they're going to be able to do a little bit of what LSU did to Texas's young corners. So I actually like that game to go over 71. But Dave, I'll let you maybe give a little extra on that Tulane game since you like that one just as much as I do, and then maybe a couple others there.
Yeah, the Tulane, I got it at -2.5 is going to be my best bet of the week. So I really like Tulane this year. I love Willie Fritz as a coach, and they have a very talented and very disciplined quarterback in Justin McMillan, who's had experience in a big-time program for LSU that is like the perfect fit for that triple option from the shotgun. So I always love disciplined triple option teams against a high-flying spread team like Houston. So that's why I've got Tulane as my best bet of the week. Some other bets, we actually already talked about most of them during the preview of the games. I've got Wisconsin to cover. I've got Georgia kind of big against Notre Dame. And a little total that I like is Washington and BYU over 49. I think based on a low-scoring affair last year, maybe that's why that line's so low. But I think Washington's been very offensive this year. BYU's defense hasn't been so great, and BYU's offense looked pretty decent last week. So I took that.
Yeah, I think BYU's offense is. I think they're improving. I think that kid at quarterback's improving, and I agree. I think Eason's added a little bit more of a dynamic. So I think kind of on the surface, like the casual fan would say, oh, Washington and BYU definitely under, but I think that's a pretty interesting spot. Yeah, I think that's a good bet. And then it looks like we covered some of the other ones. So so
we have a lot of alignment this week.
Yeah.
Except maybe a homer bet that's in there, but
right. So
I definitely like the board a lot more this week than last week.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, last week I was struggling to find more than 4 or 5 games, and this week if I really wanted to pull the trigger, I probably could get to 15 or 20, but with volume, with betting, it just ends up usually not working out. You don't want to bet like all of your leans or anything, but we seem to feel very confident about Tulane. I think this pod feels pretty confident about Northwestern. That I know Corey and Addison both have Northwestern. That's a game that I'm still leaning on and may pull the trigger on. But yeah, so any final thoughts from you guys before we wrap it up?
Yeah, my final thought tonight is I hate to do this. I hate to talk about an injured player like this, but Felipe Franks went down with probably a season-ending injury for Florida, and Kyle Trask came in and showed some magic. And I've never been a big believer in Felipe Franks, so look, Florida has not been great this year, but maybe Kyle Trask can, actually have them deserving of their ranking with improved quarterback play.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting moving forward because Florida definitely has a really strong pass rush and a pretty decent defense overall. And I know they've got good playmakers on the outside and some pretty good backs. So I think we were just kind of questioning maybe their O-line a little bit this year. And they haven't been too bad. I think it's really just been quarterback that was our main concern. So, yeah, that's a good final thought. I'm interested to see what Florida does moving forward. Addison, any final thoughts you got?
I just feel like a lot of these games are going to find out a lot more about some of these teams that we just haven't seen them really play anyone yet.
Yeah.
We're getting into conference play now, so.
Addison, let me hear.
What was that?
I said I'm going to throw I'll give you guys something quick at the end here since we're just barely over an hour. Even though it's a very small sample, so far we've only been through this is going to be week 4 that we're previewing here. Who do you think has looked the best to you in the country so far this year?
Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw this out there. With Ohio State at 6, I think it's pretty crazy that there could be 5 teams better than Ohio State. I think all of the top 6 have looked really good, though.
Yeah, I've been impressed. Even though Clemson has had Lawrence, it seems like I don't know if he's shaking off some rust or if he's pressing a little bit, but the fact that Clemson's defense looked as good as they did against A&M and as good as they've looked overall, I would say Clemson is probably the best team right now, but I'm very impressed with Ohio State. It's the first time in 4 years that I've thought that they could possibly have the best team. Alabama, when I was going through some metrics, Bama's going to be Bama, but there's some kind of concerning stuff. Their O-line they haven't really moved people around that well to start the year. I don't know if it's because
their running game, at least so far, hasn't been what you expect.
Yeah,
of course, they can still throw it on anyone.
Yeah,
so.
right. But there's been some stuff that's concerned me a little bit with them. Georgia's looked very good, though. I had some concerns about maybe the playmakers on the outside for Georgia, but they have talent there, and it looks like that those guys are going to be fine there. So, yeah, definitely interesting moving forward. But if you guys got, comments or obviously questions or anything, put them in the comment section below. Our bets each week are always going to be in the description box below the video. You guys can see our up-to-date records. If you want to see our bets as we might add them throughout the week, I tend to update those. But otherwise, we'll see you guys next time for the Week 5 preview.